As President Trump continues his effort to end Russia's war against Ukraine, the White House is responding or pondering the next steps. Joining us now is Washington correspondent Barr. And Alice, hello to you. It was an amazing scene yesterday at the White House. We saw the president with Ukraine's President Zelensky, but also several top level European leaders as well. Talk to us about the meeting and how it all unfolded.
Yeah, it really was remarkable imagery just to see. First of all, you had a bilateral meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky and their small teams. And that right there looked very different than the last time that we saw those two men together in the Oval Office, because in that last meeting, there was a bit of a shouting match. There was clearly a lot of tension. President Trump and Vice President Vance accused President Zelensky of not being grateful enough. And this time, President Zelensky made a point, I believe, maybe 6 times in his opening sentences to say thank you to President Trump and to the American people for the assistance provided to Ukraine. It was a much warmer reception and just feeling between the two men. Zelensky also wore a dark suit, which is unusual for him. Typically, he wears kind of military garb, and that's something that's been raised as an issue in the past in meetings at the White House. So that came up and was noted as a positive symbol. And then there was the vast symbolism of having all of these high-level European leaders who then came in and joined Zelensky and Trump for a broader meeting. And that really was something that we've not seen, to have that many high-level leaders of European countries sitting with President Trump inside the Oval Office. And they were there again to give this sign of solidarity, to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainian President Zelensky, and to show that it is very important to Europe to see strong backing for Ukraine to ensure that Russia's Putin is checked in his aggression, that it does not extend beyond Ukraine, and that it stops within Ukraine as well.
Gotcha. There was also a hot mic moment for the president when he was talking to the French president. Tell us about that situation.
Yeah, it was kind of revealing when you get to see, anytime you get to see something that's, a little bit off camera, it tells you a little bit about how these conversations play out behind scenes. So this one was on camera, but away from the microphones, and just kind of Zelensky, or rather President Trump and President Macron were chatting off to the sides, and President Trump could be heard telling President Macron that he thinks that Putin wants to make a deal. He said, quote, "I think he wants to make a deal for me. You understand that, as crazy as it sounds." So definitely President Trump leaning into the personal relationship that he has with President Putin of Russia, and he puts a lot of stock into his ability to bring Putin to the table and to ultimately agree to some kind of a peace deal here based on their background of their years of knowing each other. President Trump just spoke on Fox News and talked again about that, what he called a warm relationship. He said some people think that's a terrible idea to have a good relationship with Putin, but he thinks it's important for the two largest nuclear-armed countries to have a good relationship. And so that was that moment. And asked about it later in an interview with NBC News, President Macron said that, he puts a lot of stock in President Trump's optimism about his abilities to move Putin, though President Macron himself said he does not feel very optimistic about Putin actually wanting peace at this point.
Yeah, you mentioned Putin. The president called him and said made arrangements to put him and Zelensky in the same room. Do we know any details about when that meeting could take place?
Yeah, no details yet, but that really is the biggest headline coming out of this, and in fact coming in the wake of the big meeting yesterday. And President Trump again just spoke about this on Fox News. He said that, he called Russian President Putin, went through kind of some of what they discussed in the meetings yesterday, and he said that he was going to set something up to have Putin and Zelensky meet together. And then he said if that goes well, that afterwards President Trump would meet with Putin and Zelensky for a trilateral meeting, and he said that that would then wrap it up. And he thinks that's really the way to end this horrific onslaught that Russia's been waging against Ukraine, though he himself acknowledged that it remains to be seen if Putin is willing to go along with any real and substantial steps toward ending the war.
All right, Alice, thanks so much for your insight. Really appreciate it. Take care.